the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week. And welcome back, folks. Welcome back to Business Story of the Week. I am your host, Joshua. And today's question is, how do you turn chaos into success? Well, our guest for today is the perfect guest to answer that question. Randall Craig has founded several successful startups. He has held a long time position at a big four consulting firm. It was a senior executive at an American public company. Randall is currently the CEO of the Brain Trust Professional Institute, where he works exclusively with leaders on helping them scale their businesses. He has also written 8 books and has delivered hundreds of presentations of business growth in North America. And today he's going to share his insight. He's going to share his wisdom with us today. Randall, thank you for coming on the show. How are you doing?
My pleasure, Joshua. My pleasure indeed.
Well, Randall, you've had an impressive career. You went from founding successful startups, executive positions, but what was young Randall like in your childhood? What was he like? Did he always know, did young Randall always know he was going to be a business coach?
No, no, not at all, not at all. But listen, as a kid, I was certainly curious. I read voraciously,
Mhm.
and the more I read, the more stuff that I found was absolutely fascinating. And I think that maybe one of the threads, and it was a great question, Joshua, one of the threads that sort of connected the younger me or the earlier entrepreneur me to the coach me.
Okay.
And when you ask great questions, or when you're able to wire things together that perhaps maybe you're the only person who's able to see, all of a sudden, my clients would say, "Oh, I hadn't thought of it that way."
Mhm.
Well, gee, that's an interesting way of framing it. And what I'll typically say is, you know what you know, but you don't know what you don't know.
That's
And
it.
most leaders, if they have the right questions, they can usually figure out the answers.
Mhm.
And so part of my job in a certain sense is to make sure that the right questions get asked,
That's
right?
it.
And I think that being an inquisitive little kid,
That's it.
reading just so much, right? Always learning. I'm still reading a lot. I'm still
Mhm.
learning, right? But I think that's the thing that wired it together.
Was a young Randall always asking questions?
Much to the chagrin of my parents and everyone around me, yeah, I think I was, yeah.
Well, like you said, that was the thread that connected everything to your current endeavor right now and to the who Randall is right now. But there are many types of business coaching, right? Because again, your career is expansive. You founded startups, executive positions. When it comes to all these different business coaching, can you explain how a business leader or how a leader can determine type or what style is right for them and how do you cover all that
So
styles?
So let me describe three different types of coaching because sadly, the word coaching is it's an omnibus term that can mean so many different things. So I'll simplify it down to
Please.
three different types of coaches. One is what I call the traditional coach model, where the coach will say, "Well, Joshua, tell me what's up this week, this month, whatever it happens to be. What are your challenges?" And then they'd say, "So tell me, how would you think you can solve that challenge? Give me three different versions, three different
Mm,
alternatives. Which
mm,
one do you think is best?
right.
What are the blockers? What are the oh, gee, do you think you could implement? How do you solutionize that? Do you think you could do it by our next meeting next month or next week or whatever it is?" And that kind of thing, where the coach is not the subject matter expert, but helps you along a process of thinking where they're just asking questions. Can you give me three alternatives to that? Gee, which is
Mm,
better?
mm,
Okay, are there any, and that's, one particular model. And for some people, particularly where they need accountability, that's incredibly important. right? They need to report to somebody. And most leaders so that's not what I am. The second type of coach is really one
Oh,
who's more focused on assessments and what I
right.
call the internal work. So, for example, they'll do colors or
Assessment.
Myers-Briggs or DISC
Okay.
and all of those kinds of things to say, well, it looks like you have difficulty dealing with assertive people. So let's build up that particular skill. Well, to be more effective, you should be more empathetic, whatever it is. And then they work with you on building those particular attributes of your personality, if you want to think about it, or your style, your way of working with people. Well, that too is not the kind of coach that I am. And the third
Oh,
kind of coach is one where you do apply knowledge to the particular thing, where they're effectively renting your brain in order to help achieve a particular goal. So in my
okay.
particular case, it's about growing a business, all right,
Hmm.
or de-risking a business, using the words that you had before, removing some of the chaos.
Right.
So in that particular case, for me, the conversation might start off the same. Well, what's up with the business over the last month? But then the conversation becomes me asking questions. Have you considered doing this way?
Right.
What if, and I'll give you a very specific example.
Please.
One of my clients had a particular issue. It had to deal with, the economy's kind of a bit iffy and they were having some challenges. And they said, our next coaching session, I really want to dive deep on the issue of cash flow. Okay. Now it could
Mhm.
be dive deep on the issue of partner accountability. It could be dive deep on marketing strategy. It could be dive deep on whatever it is. But that's what they
Yes.
said. And I said, well, listen, I've got a white paper on unique ways of cash management and financing, et cetera, et cetera. Rather than us starting fresh, why don't I send you that white paper? You could read
Hmm.
that white paper, and when we have our conversation, we could start at a much higher level,
Hmm.
right? So those
Okay.
are the kinds of things where I'm able to add
Very
some
interesting.
specific value. So at the end of the coaching session, they do have a bit of a list of
Okay.
new things that they now know, not because I told them, but because I asked the good questions that they
Right.
now need to do in order to solve the particular business challenge that they're dealing with. And
Wow.
so this
It's
business growth coaching is
okay.
kind of a third type. And so deciding
Oh,
what you need is probably the most important thing to see who you might want to actually work with.
that's it. That's it. So it involves internal, of course, an internal assessment, borrowing that knowledge that you have, and now you're coming into this picture, coaching them with business growth. But you mentioned there is determining who you want to work with, and I feel like that involves a lot of getting to know yourself as well. Craig, Daniel, I want to really get into the nitty gritty of how you approach business coaching at a wide scale, so to speak. Like, how do you cover all these grounds with all the executives and all the companies that you work with? But also, what would be the biggest, or rather, the most common challenge that all of these leaders and these executives that always face, and how do you help them overcome it?
So Joshua, I just lost you a little bit.
Okay,
Okay. So
sure,
I
no
think I
problem.
heard you asking what's the most common challenge that these leaders actually have. I could tell you immediately what that
Right,
is.
please.
Okay. And that's very simple. They started their organization or they got hired into the organization at a certain level. They've then grown it to a higher level. Once they've
Mhm.
grown it to that higher level, okay, they move into an area where they're not as certain because they haven't done it before, or they've
Right,
done it, in one particular way or in another, but they haven't got all the experience of operating at that higher level,
right.
right? So all of a sudden there's a little bit of it's not fear, but it's like, oh gee, the stakes are high. I've got to make sure
Mhm.
that I make the right decision, even though I've not done all of this before.
Right.
And so like I said, they know what they know, what they don't know, what they don't know.
Yes, of
I
course.
sit a company that I sit on a board with
Mhm.
just went public last week, right? And so
Mhm.
this is very exciting, certainly for me as a public company director, but it's also exciting for everybody within the organization.
Mhm.
Well, what if the CEO hadn't actually gone through the going public process before,
Interesting.
right? They wasn't too.
Interesting.
What if somebody hadn't raised financing before? What if somebody
Right.
hadn't developed a channel strategy before? What if somebody hadn't hired a C-level management team before? What if
Right.
the team that they did hire, okay, now that they're at this higher level, they're not the right people, or the
Mm.
management processes
Ooh,
aren't in right. Like
that's
it's
it.
right for this size organization, not this size
Yeah.
organization. So whether it's the people or the processes or the financing or
Yeah.
the marketing or
Yeah.
whatever it is, it's stretched, right? And so
Yes.
by boring the brain cells, if you will, of
Hmm.
somebody who's done before, you significantly de-risk the business. But you
Yes.
also have somebody that you can, pound ideas back and forth on,
Okay.
right? And
Okay.
you can test drive things. You can't go to your board because your ideas aren't fully formed. You can't go to your team because there might be a bit of a bias there. They
Right.
might not give
Right.
you the exact
Absolutely.
advice you want. They've got self-interest. So having somebody outside, right, means that you've got a much, much greater chance of being successful. So that's a lot of words to say. What you know, but you don't know what you don't know,
That's
right?
it
So
precisely. I love that. I knew it was gonna. It felt like you were gonna tie it back to that. But I love how you said that because first off, that's a very common challenge. And for our audience and listeners, I'm sure they could relate to a level that wow, they already took their business like that, and now they're like, ooh, you like. What do I do now? It's at this level, I don't know how to handle it. It's more important now, becomes more apparent that you have an outsider's perspective, much like yours, to kind of give you that fresh perspective, so to speak. You mentioned one in there, marketing, a marketing strategy evolution of sorts. You've written extensively on marketing strategy for service-based businesses, or when you're coaching your individuals and
mhm.
companies, executives. What significant changes have you seen in the marketing area over the past few years? And how do you feel businesses have adapted, or rather, how do you teach them to adapt?
Okay, great question, Joshua. So first of all, if we go way, way back when, people
Oh,
made
please.
deals at the club, right? And
Right.
then many, many years later, some biz school professors came up with the concept of a framework. For
Hmm.
example, in marketing, the 4P framework: price,
Hmm.
product, a place, and promo. And the idea was that if you get those four things, well, you then have a marketing strategy. But the problem with that kind of framework is, where's the prospect? Where's the client? Right? Where are they? They're not there because those frameworks are descriptive. They have nothing to do with wiring marketing to business development.
Right.
Nothing.
That's it.
And so the framework that we've developed over the last several decades, we call the trust curve. And it essentially says, as at the very beginning, you don't know anybody. They don't know you. They don't know their needs. They don't know nothing. Okay. So
Hmm.
that's at one end. The other end, it's, they're making a commitment. They're signing a contract. They're buying the product or service, etc. And
Yes.
and organizations, decision makers, go through four stages of the trust curve. Over time, trust increases, and they go from awareness
Right.
to preference. I prefer you and your products and
Uh huh.
services over somebody else's.
Uh huh.
To trial, they're going to test drive what you've got to make sure it works. To commitment, okay, I'm going to sign the
Wow.
contract. I'm going to
Okay.
purchase the service and product. So, just as an example, tying this back for a moment, just to coaching. Okay,
Mhm.
so fine, people can read. I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of articles and stuff on my randallcraig.com website. They can read that.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
awareness. They find me. They search
Yes.
for me. You'll find me. Okay, read that stuff. That's preference. But what's trial? What is trial? So in my particular
What
case,
is try?
trial. And think about it, as a coach, as an advisor. My business is no different from other people's business. Trial is, let me give you a test drive. Let me give you 1 hour. Ask me anything, and during that time, you get to test drive. If you like the chocolate, you'll buy the box,
That's
right?
it.
And so most businesses now are not sort of on the trust curve, where they realize where the relationship and the stages and the programs and initiatives at each of those four stages are not particularly set, or they're
That's
not
it.
thinking about how to use content and thought leadership at each of
Mhm.
those four stages. They don't think about how might we use technology across each of those four
Mhm.
stages.
Mhm.
So some of my coaching, when we're talking about Like earlier, we're talking about finance and accounting. When we're talking about marketing strategy, it's a question of, gee, as a successful organization, you've got a lot of things that you are doing successfully in a marketing, business development, sales kind of zone. How does
Mm-hmm.
that fit into onto the trust curve? And where are the places on that trust curve that maybe are not doing so well, or that haven't
Mm-hmm.
been looked at, or maybe there's
Right.
that missing link, that one missing link. Is if we sort of solve that one, if we put that bridge over, we'll get to the other side. And
Wow.
so that's the kind of thing. So when I'm speaking as a speaker at a conference, that's part of what I'm talking about. Or if there's a certain challenges from a marketing biz dev perspective
Right.
with a coaching client, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. Not
That's,
theoretically, but what specifically can you do?
that's it. That's it. And that's why, of course, we're going to have that link down there. And this is where you invite them on Ask Me Anything, a no cost 1 hour call with Randall Craig, where he gets to ask you, talk about what you're trying to achieve in your calls. I love that you employ that kind of really just allowing people to pick your brain, so to speak. I love your concept that you call the trust curve. You really emphasize on the importance of the trust curve and thought leadership. Can you explain a bit more the concept of a trust curve, how it correlates with the business goals and how it ties in together with marketing? Why is it a trust curve? You explained that a little bit, but if you could go deeper, how can a
Sure.
business leverage that curve into their overall strategy and efforts?
So there's a concept called journey, the customer journey, the client journey,
Right,
where every single touch point, every time you touch an organization, a client or an organization, it could be an email, it could be a telephone, it could be a real world interaction, it could be something that somebody's reading or listening to, like
right.
this podcast, right? So
Mhm.
at every single touch point, one thing is going to happen: trust will increase or
Trust
trust
me.
will erode. It'll increase or it'll erode. And so the goal of all the goal of a marketer is
Mm.
to increase the trust to the point where people say, yes, indeed, this particular organization can solve my problem. They don't care about me. They only care about
Yes.
how I can solve their problem. So they've got to
Mhm.
have trust that I can actually do it. So the trust curve, awareness, preference, trial, commitment, is a framework that we can use to say, okay, along that journey from awareness all the way through to commitment,
Mhm.
how do we actually increase trust? Because once we've got
Wow.
that, it becomes an awful lot easier to actually grow your business. And it's not a question of price, product, place, and promo from like
Of
decades and
course.
decades ago. It's really more a question of saying, gee, if they trust us, okay, and by the way, when that happens, we'll have earned their trust. When they
Right.
trust us, um, it becomes very easy for us to help them through the buying process, which is, by the way, very different than us selling to them. We're helping them
Yes.
through the buying process by educating them,
That's
okay,
it.
by earning their trust at every single client journey touch point.
I love that. I love that. And that's a lot of tie-in into marketing because that is where you build really your identity as the expert to be trusted. You're developing yourself. You're putting yourself out there for people to see, so that when it comes to what you just said, and I love they related there, when it comes to selling, you're actually not selling anymore. Because by the time
No.
that you have that conversation, they've already trusted you. You're just improving the experience, so to speak. You're selling without actually selling.
So,
And
so let
this,
me give you
oh,
let me
please,
give you
please.
another example. Let me give you another example of that, Joshua. We mentioned just moments ago my Ask Me Anything, the
Hmm.
free hour of coaching. It's not free. Okay, let me just say this. At the very end, you have to agree to give me 2 minutes to ask two questions. That's the
Hmm.
cost, those two questions. What are the two
That's
questions?
it.
Number one, in our time together, did we significantly move the needle? Did we make a difference? Was there, not here's a couple ideas, but did it make a significant difference? Question number
Interesting.
two is, if we made a significant difference, does it make sense to meet on a regular basis monthly?
That's
And
it.
if the answer to that is yes, then we could talk about what that might mean in terms of coaching. But what that those two simple questions did is they said, hey, listen, it's not just here's something for free and then nothing happens afterwards. It's the question of, gee, did I solve the problems of the day? Did I earn the
Wow.
right to ask, do you want to talk about possibly
Mhm.
doing business together?
Wow.
Right? And so that's an example of how you wire trial to commitment, but it's also an example of saying, hey, unless you prove yourself, unless you've got the chance to earn the trust, but also demonstrate expertise,
Wow.
no one's going to do business with you.
That's true.
No
That
one's
is
going to
very
do
true.
business with you. You got to prove it. You got to earn the right, which is what that Ask Me Anything is all about. It's a terribly difficult hot seat for me. It's fun. It's totally fun. But
Yes.
unless the person that you're actually meeting gets significant value, there's no other conversation to be had.
This your experience really is reflecting with all the 8 books you've written, with all the presentations on business growth that you have written. The one common thread I feel is, how are you building that trust? How are you proving to people that you can actually, it's one thing to have a business growth goal in mind, but how are you gaining that trust? How are you actually delivering? It's great that there is a voice like yours, an expert like yours, guiding all the executives and leadership all around the world. Randall, how rewarding must it feel, or does it get you up in the morning? Is it always motivating to go do your business coaching? And it always ties back, I feel like, to the young Randall, right? Do you feel like today we are asking the right question, you or rather are asking the right questions? And do you feel like the people and the individuals that you coach are getting better at asking the right questions?
Hmm. Sometimes they don't know the questions to ask. Back to what
That's
I
it.
said there. But to answer your real question
Mhm.
is, yeah, I find it incredibly satisfying.
Right.
I've built and sold a bunch of my own businesses, etc. For me,
Very interesting.
watching the light bulb go on, whether it's in front of a large audience as a speaker, whether it's
Mhm.
it's coaching a CEO, managing director, or whether it's a managing partner, or whether it's working with a board or an executive team, all of a sudden the light bulbs go on, and I think, okay, I think we just made a difference here,
That's
right? I
it.
think we just made a difference. We're moving this enterprise forward, whichever the particular client is. Incredibly satisfying, right? And
Yes. And
you know,
Randall, the question earlier to start off the show, how do you transform chaos into success? And I feel like you slowly answered that by saying that if you know the right questions to ask and you know all these steps, you're guiding that, you're guiding that experience to building that trust. Then you turn that into success. Randall, I want to pick a little bit more of your insight, but on a personal aspect of it, and a personal glimpse into your own life. How do you see yourself in the future? How do you see yourself, businesses and coaching businesses and helping them in their marketing efforts and their business growth? Is there any personal aspirations of Randall Craig himself? What does the future look like?
listen, you know what? I'm a fellow certified management consultant. I'm in the Speaker Hall of Fame, right?
Yes,
I've
you
got
are.
all these books, etc. So it's not a question of external accolades. For me, it's always a question of how can we make the biggest difference to the greatest number of people.
Mhm.
The Brain Trust Professional Institute, the organization I run, it's all about empowering management teams, entrepreneurial leaders to actually do better with
Mhm.
their teams to get to the next level. And right now, this is my third startup, right? So this is something that I'm very, very excited to grow. But it only happens, frankly, when we're able to reach,
Mhm.
excuse
Mhm.
me, folks who need the specific things that we have. So, we don't work with organizations we don't know anything about in
Of
terms of
course.
their industry and so on. We don't work, for example, at the most junior level in an organization. We work at the leadership level, at the board level, at the divisional head level, right? And so really, it's a question of leading the team to make a difference out in the market. So that's what's
And,
exciting to me: building something again and making a difference.
and of course, currently, that current endeavor is Brain Trust Professionals Institute, which is what you are
Professional
building.
Institute.
Professional Institute. So with the S there, Brain Trust Professional Institute, where again you're helping leaders scale their business. Randall, how can we find you? Where can we learn more about Brain Trust, and what can we expect in the future with Brain Trust as well?
Oh man, so many questions in such a little bit of a time, little bit. So,
Yes.
so if you're interested in coaching or just learning a little bit more about that, randallcraig.net/coach,
Mm-hmm.
randallcraig.net/coach.
Slash coach.
If you want more about all of the services that we offer at the Brain Trust Professional Institute, just go there, braintrustprofessionalinstitute.com.
Mm-hmm.
And there are literally, you know, hours and hours of
Thousands.
fascinating content there that you can you can test drive, etc. There,
Uh-huh.
if you're interested in reading, just go to randallcraig.com, and there's 600 plus articles there that you could read on business growth and related topics. And you can reach me through either of those, randallcraig.net/coach or at braintrustprofessionalinstitute.com.
That's fantastic. And of course, I invite our audience and listeners to check out all that links. We're going to have them down there, of course, in the description as well. How about socials? Randall, are you on any socials? Can we follow you on them?
Yeah, the best place probably is LinkedIn, linkedin.com/in/Randall Craig. And I'm sure, Joshua, you're going to have those links below as well. But always interested in connecting there. I do a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn. You could get to it there. It's all about business growth. There's many different resources that I link to as well there. It's all about helping you do better in your business.
I love it. I love it. And we're, of course, we're already connected on LinkedIn. I invite our audience and listeners to do the same. Same Randall over a connection. And Randall, I love it. I love the concept that you taught and shared us today. Our audience and listeners who are a mix of startups and entrepreneurs themselves, I'm sure received a lot of value today from what you have taught us and what you've shared. Randall, one last thing, one last bit of wisdom that you would like to leave behind. What would it be? Take us home.
It's very simple. What got you there won't get you to that next place. You do not
Wow.
need to do it all on your own. You
Wow.
do not need to just sort of guess. You know,
Wow.
you could rent the brain cells to get to you where you need to go faster at lower risk and perhaps have a little bit more fun.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
you don't need to do it all by yourself. And for those who are interested in doing a test drive, love to meet you on an Ask Me Anything meeting. So
Absolutely.
that's the message.
Our audience and listeners out there, I invite you guys, check it out. Ask Randall anything. Make sure to click on those links that we're going to put up in there. Randall, thank you so much for your time. I truly, truly loved everything that you've taught us today.
Thank you, Joshua.
It's fantastic. And to all our audience and listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed this one. We will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.